My fiancé Ryan told me real love meant sacrifice, mine, never his. When I hesitated to quit my job, he canceled my health insurance, so he warned me, but I thought she was jealous. The night I collapsed at work, Ryan said I embarrassed him. That was 4 months ago. Ow, I'm testifying against him and his mother, and this time I'm not shaking. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next. 3 weeks before the engagement, Ryan scrolled through my phone while I was in the shower. Just making sure you're safe, he said, smiling. I laughed it off, but Zoe looked horrified. She mentioned boundaries, but I brushed it aside. He had never hit me. He bought me roses that night. I thought it was love. Looking back, that was the first time I felt like I was being watched, not cherished. 2 days before my birthday, Ryan canceled my girls' night with Zoe. I planned something better, he said, and booked us a couples retreat I never asked for. I smiled for photos, posted them online, and captioned it blessed. Inside, I felt trapped. Zoe texted, "You okay?" I replied with a heart emoji. Later, I learned he had called my boss to say I was mentally unstable. I found out months later after the damage was done. After I missed a critical work meeting due to the retreat, my boss Mark sat me down. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. I lied, said I had food poisoning. That night, Ryan screamed at me for being disloyal and tossed my phone against the wall. Zoe found me crying in the bathroom. The next day, she handed me a prepaid phone. "In case you ever need to disappear," she whispered. That seed of fear and freedom was planted. Linda, Ryan's mother, began showing up unannounced. She'd clean my cabinets, comment on my weight, and say, "You're not taking care of him right." I felt erased in my own home, so we offered to confront her. But Ryan warned, "Family's off limits." I stopped answering Zoe's calls. One day I opened my journal to find pages ripped out. Ryan shrugged. "Must've been the dog. We didn't have one." That night, I slept with the prepaid phone under my pillow. I tried quitting my job to avoid more arguments, but Mark refused my resignation. "This isn't you," he said, sliding a therapist's card across the desk. I tore it up when I got home. Ryan smiled. "Good girl." That night, he smashed my laptop for not locking the front door. I told Zoe I tripped. She didn't believe me. She left a note in my purse, "Your story matters. When you're ready, I'll be here." Ryan installed cameras in every room except the bathroom. "For safety," he said. I nodded, but I stopped singing in the kitchen, stopped talking on the phone. Zoe warned me it was illegal. Linda said, "You should be grateful." I stopped calling my parents at work. I was quieter, slower. Mark asked if I needed time off. I said no. I didn't want to be alone. The cameras blinked red every night. They never stopped recording. Neither did he after Ryan broke my wrist during an argument about groceries. He took me to a clinic 2 towns over. "Tell them you felt," he whispered. I did. The nurse gave me a long look, then handed me a pamphlet on domestic violence folded into my discharge papers. I hid it in my boot. That night, Zoe called from a blocked number. "Say one word if you're not safe," I whispered. "Dog." It was the code we agreed on. Zoe picked me up from work in silence. At her apartment, Officer Ramirez waited. He listened, recorded, and handed me a restraining order form. "We'll need proof," he said. We planned for weeks. I slept on Zoe's couch, jumpy at every sound. Vanessa, a new physical therapy patient of Zoe's, agreed to help. She had her own scars. We baited Ryan with a fake email about security footage. He fell for it. We staged the trap at Vanessa's old apartment. Ryan showed up with Linda. Furious and unhinged, hidden cameras caught everything, his yelling, her threats. When Vanessa screamed, "You ruined my life too," I almost dropped the phone. Police swarmed the hallway. Ramirez nodded once. It was over, I thought. But Linda mouthed, "You'll regret this." As they cuffed her, that chill stayed with me long after they were gone. 3 days after their arrest, I returned to the apartment to pack. My journal was gone, so were my medical records. I called Ramirez, but confirmed they were seized as evidence. So he found me on the floor. Sobbing, "You're not what they did to you," she said, holding my hand. But in that moment, I felt erased, like every part of my pain had been confiscated, archived, and judged. I didn't feel free, not yet. Mark offered me a transfer, new team, new city. I almost said yes. But Vanessa needed me. She was pregnant and scared. "I don't want my baby to ever feel afraid," she whispered. That night, we started a support group, just the 3 of us. So we bought tea lights, 1 for each survivor, she said. I lit mine with shaking hands, but steady breath. For the first time, I spoke without apology, and they listened. The first letter arrived 2 weeks later, no return address, just a photo of me walking alone. Vanessa received one too. Ramirez couldn't trace it, so he insisted we change routines. I refused. "He wants me scared," I said. But when I found a voice memo on my phone I hadn't recorded, I moved in with Zoe temporarily. That night, we installed security cameras of our own, and I started carrying pepper spray again. Vanessa confronted Linda at a court hearing, demanding answers. Linda laughed. "He never hit you, right? Then what's the crime?" The judge didn't flinch. Vanessa cried in the hallway. I hugged her, but inside, rage burned. That night, Zoe pulled out a file she built, photos, receipts, texts. "We go public." She said. I hesitated, thinking of Ryan's threats. "We've survived worse," Vanessa whispered. That was the moment we stopped surviving. We started fighting back. Zoe uploaded everything: Linda's voicemail, Ryan's threats, clinic records, to a secure site. She posted the link anonymously on survivor forums. Within days, strangers began sharing their own stories. Some named Ryan. One claimed Linda helped cover up a case years ago. Ramirez reopened investigations. "You lit a fire," he told us. Vanessa's baby kicked during the call. We smiled, but kept our guard up. Survivors from 3 states reached out. We weren't alone anymore. That changed everything. 2 weeks later, the site went down. Our accounts were hacked, photos deleted, messages gone. Zoe's laptop wouldn't turn on. Ramirez suspected retaliation. But it's not over, he promised. Vanessa and I went analog flyers, postcards, in-person meetups. We rebuilt everything offline. At a meetup, I met Mia, Ryan's ex from college. She said he nearly pushed her downstairs once. No one believed her then. Now, we had proof, and more women ready to testify. Ryan's defense team filed a countersuit, defamation. It rattled me. Vanessa panicked. Zoe stayed calm. "We're not lying," she said. We held a press conference at the community center. Mia shared her story. Ramirez stood beside us. When the cameras turned off, I felt exposed but not ashamed. The court date was set. Linda posted bail, Ryan didn't. That night, we received flowers. No card, just a note, see you soon. We changed hotels again. Linda tried contacting Zoe's clinic through fake patient accounts. One used my old photos. Zoe shut down the website temporarily. We met at a diner. Phones off, only notepads. Ramirez arranged surveillance at our building. Vanessa moved into my room. Mia helped coordinate court testimony schedules. We formed a rotation, no one left alone. At night, we shared one kitchen, one table, and finally, one laugh. Fear hadn't vanished. But it had company now, and we weren't shrinking. The first day of court, Ryan stared me down from behind glass. I didn't look away. Vanessa held my hand and Mia testified first. Her voice trembled, but she didn't break. Then it was my turn. I brought the pamphlet I'd hidden in my boot. He taught me silence, I said. That ends today. Linda scoffed. The judge warned her. For the first time, I felt the gavel's weight shifting toward justice. Toward me. Mid-trial, Ramirez revealed new evidence, voice memos from Ryan's car synced to cloud storage. He had recorded conversations, threats, arguments, even Linda coaching him. I listened to one in court. Make her think it's her fault, Linda said. Gasps filled the room. The defense fell silent. I glanced at Zoe. She nodded once. We'd always known the truth. Now, the court did too. It wasn't over. But we had them. Finally, the mask cracked. Linda took the stand the next day. She cried loud theatrical sobs, claimed she was a victim too. Claimed Ryan had a temper, but was misunderstood. Ramirez handed over bank transfers, money she paid victims to stay quiet. One receipt matched Mia's claim. The jury looked disgusted. Vanessa muttered, she's done. I stared at Linda, not with hate but clarity. This wasn't just about Ryan, it was about every silence she demanded, and I wasn't silent anymore. After court, someone left a stuffed animal on our doorstep, same brand Ryan used to gift me after fights. Vanessa vomited. I ripped its head off and threw it away. Ramirez reviewed footage but found nothing. It's fear tactics, Zoe said. We held a meeting that night, 30 women, 6 from out of state. Mia spoke, then I did. My voice didn't shake. We weren't just witnesses anymore, we were warriors, and we weren't backing down. Ryan's lawyer tried to discredit us, called me vindictive, Zoe manipulative, Vanessa unstable. I stared straight ahead. Mia whispered, you're doing great. When he questioned the flyers we'd made, I pulled out one with Zoe's handwriting. You matter, we believe you. The courtroom quieted. Ramirez smirked. That flyer had led 3 witnesses to testify. The jury took notes. For every lie they told, we had receipts, and for every silence, we now had voices. The night before closing arguments, Linda tried calling from jail. I didn't answer. Zoe played the voicemail, her sobbing, begging for forgiveness. It was all him, she cried. Vanessa threw her phone across the room. She's only sorry she got caught. We deleted the message. Then we made posters for our next group meeting. Mia found a name for us, The Unbroken. We printed 20. By morning, we needed twice that. Survivors kept showing up. Closing arguments began. The prosecution showed timelines, recordings, the flyer. They ended with the pamphlet I'd hidden in my boot. I held it up as I spoke. This saved my life. Now we save others. Ryan stared like he didn't recognize me. Linda shook her head, defeated. When we stepped outside, a news crew asked if I had any final words. I said, we warn them. Ow, the world listens, and it finally did. Deliberation took 6 hours. I didn't pace. I folded pamphlets. Mia made tea. Zoe lit candles. Vanessa braided my hair. We weren't panicking, we were preparing. When the jury returned, the courtroom stilled. Guilty on all counts, Ryan and Linda. Ramirez exhaled. I didn't cry, not yet. Outside, a girl barely 20 handed me a letter. You gave me words. It read. That's when I cried. Not for fear, for every silence that finally ended. Ryan was sentenced to 7 years. Linda received 3. Survivors lined the hallway, applauding. I walked past Ryan without flinching. You'll miss me, he sneered. I smiled. I already forgot you. Outside, a survivor handed me a sunflower. Because you grew through it, she said. So we framed the note. Vanessa bought sunflower seeds. We planted them at the community center's front garden. That spring, they bloomed. Every petal whispered what we already knew. We made it. 6 weeks later, we hosted our first official Unbroken Summit. 65 women attended. Zoe gave the opening talk. Vanessa shared her birth plan. Mia led a writing workshop. I closed the event with one line, silence doesn't keep us safe, truth does. Applause echoed. A survivor from Texas hugged me and whispered, he did the same thing. We gave her pamphlets, tea, a rye. She didn't need to prove her pain. She just needed someone to believe it. Vanessa went into labor during one of our meetups. Zoe drove. I held her hand. Name her Lily, she gasped. She grows through mud. Hours later, Lily was born, perfect, unshaken. When I held her, I thought of every woman who never made it to safety. We named them on paper lanterns and let them float at dusk. A crowd gathered in silence. Zoe whispered, this is what survival builds legacy. We all nodded and cried. On Lily's first night home, a final letter arrived postmarked weeks earlier. Inside, a check from an anonymous donor for our group. For every voice you returned, it read, Zoe cry. Vanessa framed it. I stood on the porch, watching the stars. No sirens, no shadows, just quiet, but not empty, quiet, peaceful. I held Lily close, kissed her head. You'll never wonder if you're enough, I whispered. And for the first time, I believed it too. A year passed. I wore colors again, bright ones. I danced at Lily's birthday, barefoot in the grass. Zoe opened a second support group. Mia self-published a memoir. Vanessa laughed easily now. The sunflower garden doubled. I kept the boot that once hid my lifeline. Not as a relic, but as proof. Proof that fear doesn't win when love turns into truth. And silence, it's no longer part of my story. Some days, the memories still visit quick, sharp, but they don't linger. I take walks alone now. I volunteer at the shelter. I teach women to build safety plans, to trust their instincts, to name their fears out loud. One wrote, I didn't know I could start over. I replied, you can. I always keep extra pamphlets in my bag because someone always needs one, and now, I'm always ready. Ryan remains in prison. Linda's therapy sessions became mandatory. A recent article named our group a national movement. I didn't care for headlines, but the photo showed us all smiling, together. That mattered. Zoe mailed copies to every member. Vanessa keeps one above Lily's crib. I framed mine beside the flyer that started it all, not as a trophy but as a promise. We kept going. We still do. I spoke at a women's conference last week. Told my story without trembling after a teenager hugged me. He hasn't hit me either, she whispered. But I'm scared. I gave her a pamphlet, my number, and my time. She smiled through tears. That's what healing looks like now, not just mine, but theirs too. And love doesn't control. Love walks beside you free, unafraid, unbroken. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe to check out more stories on my channel.